Why do nearly 7 out of 10 mid-career Americans say they're operating below their potential or still searching for it, even while holding stable jobs and advanced degrees? Gallup's 2023 Human Capital Index surveyed 15,000 adults aged 30 to 45 and found that 68% felt they hadn't located or were somehow falling short of their real capabilities. Neuroimaging research at the University of Michigan adds a biological layer. Volunteers who called themselves underutilized showed 35% higher baseline activity in the brain's default mode network, the circuitry tied to rumination and future worry. We can literally see potential anxiety glowing on a scan. Alan Watts diagnosed the feeling long before fMRI machines existed. We suffer from a hallucination called "there's something more important than this moment." Science photographs the unrest. Watts explains its sting. We're so busy rehearsing a grand debut that we overlook the music already playing under our feet. In 2014, the valedictorian of a top-ranked New Jersey high school vanished the week after graduation. Friends flooded Instagram with missing posters. Local news speculated about crime. 2 months later, she resurfaced in rural Colorado, tending goats for minimum wage. Asked why she'd abandoned a full scholarship to MIT, she offered a line that vibrated like a tuning fork. "I didn't disappear, I just stopped auditioning." The public shivered because the fear felt familiar. What if my whole life is an audition I never agreed to? Modern life distills that paradox. Universities market potential the way Silicon Valley sells IPOs. Make the right deposits now, harvest astonishing returns later. Corporations do it too. Fast-track talent pools, leadership pipelines, high-potential tags slipped into HR files. It feels flattering until you realize the label is also a lease. We own your tomorrow, so perform today. Yet performance has a cost the glossy brochures omit. Neuroscientists tracking chronic achievers find cortisol saturates tissue, shrinking the hippocampus, the brain's imagination studio. The more you strain to prove potential, the less neural space remains to explore it. It's like squeezing a fist around water. Effort rises, yield drips away. Social media compounds the squeeze. Algorithms reward anything measurable: marathon medals, startup launches, before-after reels, invisible progress, pausing, composting, switching majors at 27 draws no likes. Watts warned, no valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now. But the timeline scroll keeps chanting, publish or perish. The feed applauds only when your milestones hit their marketing windows. Picture an elevator ride with someone you admire. They ask, "What do you do?" Pulse spikes, rehearsed answers feel hollow. 3 floors later, the doors part and conversation ends, leaving a dull thud in your chest. If your potential can't be pitched before the bell dings, does it exist? That discomfort is a second hook, proof that the pressure isn't abstract, it's visceral, lodged behind the sternum like a stone. Consider Julia Child. She couldn't boil an egg at 30, felt directionless at 40, published Mastering the Art of French Cooking at 49. She didn't find latent greatness. She followed curiosity across detours, spy work in Sri Lanka, hat-making in California, halting French in Paris. Skills converged because she allowed them to simmer, not because she optimized them for quarterly reviews. Watts would call that wu-wei, non-forcing, ability arising when tension subsides. Or take the late-blooming actor J.K. Simmons.
"If you deliberately sabotage my band, I will f you like a pig. Now, are you a rusher, or are you a dragger, or are you gonna be on my time?"
I'm gonna be on your time.
What does that say?
At 42, he was invisible in regional theater, long past Hollywood's mythic breakout age. He kept refining, line by line, year by year. When Whiplash finally ripped open the screen, critics said he burst onto the scene, oblivious that the burst was decades of quiet pressure finding daylight. Simmons's Oscar wasn't speed, it was sedimentary depth. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Potential, then, isn't a straight line, but a geologic process. Layers forming in darkness, compacting under quiet weight. Yet the culture rarely shows that cross-section. We see only the polished slice, the viral minute, the bestseller list, the highlight reel that suggests destiny, not duration. So how do you hold steady when the world grades you for growth you can't yet display? Start with Watts's simplest inversion. Treat life as music rather than journey. In music, each note matters for its own timbre, not merely as conduit to the finale. If you're racing toward a resolution, you miss the harmony unfolding under your feet. Translate that to your Monday, reading a manual because it sparks interest, not because it fattens your LinkedIn headline, is already living potential. The enjoyment is not delay, it's delivery. Second, audit which metrics actually serve you. Disable follower counters and productivity dashboards for 30 days. Track feelings instead. Which tasks leave you lighter? Which drain you, even when praised? Activities you repeat without external applause are routes, not auditions. You'll notice boredom recede. Imagination fills the vacuum left by constant judgment. Third, answer elevator questions with exploration, not production. If someone asks, "What do you do?" respond, "I'm learning jazz chords," or "I'm mapping bird migration." The conversation swivels from scoreboard to story. You grant yourself permission to be a verb, developing, rather than a noun to be evaluated. But we must also confront systems that monetize unrealized potential. Corporations dangle promotions the way casinos dangle jackpots. Statistical outliers packaged as probable futures. Fast-track programs can accelerate growth, yet they also extract free overtime from workers desperate not to squander their chance. Watts cautioned against the preoccupation with what should be rather than what is. When a workplace praises your someday while pilfering your every today, they are profiting from your anxiety. History offers a stark case, the frozen chosen. In the 1960s, NASA set aside dozens of brilliant engineers who didn't fit bureaucratic templates. Many left, forming startups that reinvented computing. Their genius surfaced only after escaping a system that measured worth by conformity. Lesson: when evaluation bars experimentation, potential migrates elsewhere. Watts framed the antidote as the backward law. When you try to stay on the surface of the water, you sink. When you try to sink, you float. The harder you chase external validation, the further it recedes. Release the demand to be extraordinary, and extraordinary work can emerge. Some professionals delete LinkedIn for a year. Initial panic gives way to creativity. Without mirrors of comparison, subtler inner cues surface. Does abandoning metrics mean drifting aimlessly? Watts would laugh. He drafted lectures meticulously, yet anchored them in play. The solution is microstructure that serves curiosity. Time-boxed experiments, 20 minutes daily on cello for 90 days. Prototype mindset, draft a zine, test a workshop. Feedback from co-explorers rather than gatekeepers. Structure becomes trampoline, not cage. The loudest critic often lives inside. When that inner voice sneers, "You're wasting potential," pause 10 seconds, the same pause we use against external disrespect. Ask, potential for what, for whom? If the answer feels borrowed, return it. Replace accusation with Watts's invitation. What would you do if money were no object? The response isn't a career plan, it's a compass pointing toward where your breath deepens. A society obsessed with peak performance breeds burnout, shallow innovation, brittle self-worth. Normalizing rhythmic development, seasons of bloom and dormancy, fosters resilient creativity. Imagine schools grading experimentation, not just answers. Companies celebrating sabbaticals as investment, not indulgence. Watts envisioned flowing systems where people move like water around obstacles rather than blasting through them. So next time someone asks how you'll capitalize on your promise, remember that life isn't a problem to solve, but a song to inhabit. Potential isn't a mountain you conquer, it's a river you learn to float within, sometimes swift, sometimes still, always moving home. If that thought feels more like a sigh than a battle cry, good. That sigh is space returning to your chest, space where real potential finally has room to breathe. A few years ago, a Harvard Business Review survey revealed something embarrassing for corporate America. Almost half of young professionals intended to leave their first dream job within 24 months, not because they had failed, but because they had succeeded too quickly. Promotions arrived, raises cleared, yet an odd vacuum followed. The resume looked heavier, the calendar fuller, but the internal compass kept spinning. What began as a triumph felt strangely like being locked inside a glass staircase. Visible ascent, invisible destination. Rather than climb higher, many quietly filed exit papers and stepped into what economists call a quarter-life renovation, a wholesale redrafting of the blueprint that had steered them since kindergarten. Law associates resurfaced as UX designers, hedge fund analysts became high school teachers, marketing managers learned carpentry. From the outside, these pivots resembled midlife crises running a decade early. From the inside, they felt more like resuscitation. Jessica's story could be any of ours. Cum laude from a Big Ten university, she landed a rotational program at a Fortune 100 company, moved through 3 departments in 18 months, and earned a 6-figure package by 25. Her parents boasted, LinkedIn applauded, yet she woke each Monday with jaw pain from nocturnal teeth grinding. One January morning, she entered her apartment lobby, felt the lanyard around her neck, and burst into tears so abruptly the security guard thought she'd received tragic news. She had, only it was whispered, not shouted. The path she'd sprinted since AP Calculus belonged to someone she had outgrown. 2 weeks later, she put the badge in a drawer, joined a 6-month web development boot camp, and accepted a junior role at a nonprofit that paid half but allowed her to sleep through the night. From the outside, she had left potential on the table. Inside, she had freed potential from a table it never fit. Stories like Jessica's multiply across coffee shops and co-working spaces, yet we mislabel them as impatience. What if they are not flightiness, but calibration? Alan Watts would nod. He argued that the Western imagination teaches children to treat life as a deferred payment plan. Endure algebra now, so college will bloom later. Endure college, so corporate prestige blooms later. Endure prestige, so retirement blooms later, until blooming feels perpetually postponed. Watts called this the postponement fallacy, a trick of consciousness that mortgages the present to purchase an ever-retreating future. Quarter-life renovation, then, is not failure to commit, it is refusal to perpetually postpone. Walk through any big city neighborhood at dawn, and you will meet an informal fellowship of renovators, a former CPA apprenticing at a patisserie because butter and calculus activate different parts of her brain, a biomedical PhD rebuilding vintage motorcycles because torque solves puzzles equations never touched. These people are not allergic to hard work. They are allergic to hollow work. They swapped ladder for lattice, linear ascent for lateral exploration, not because lateral pays more, it rarely does, but because sideways grants oxygen to lungs starved by vertical climb. In a lattice you can pause, pivot, pursue curiosity without falling off the structure. In a ladder you cling or you drop. There is no meadow at midair. At this juncture, the self-help industry typically marches in waving banners that read, "Find your passion." The slogans look uplifting. In practice, they often deepen paralysis. Stanford psychologists Gregory Walton and Carol Dweck ran experiments showing that students who believed in one preordained passion abandoned challenging courses faster than students who saw passion as cultivated. If destiny is singular, any difficulty feels like a sign you chose wrong. By contrast, viewing passion as a garden you tend, not a soulmate you discover, breeds resilience. Watts anticipated this research 60 years earlier. Better to have a mind like water than a will like iron, he advised. Water finds crevices iron ignores. The passion culture also hides a math problem. Society generates far fewer glamorous dream roles than citizens it exhorts to chase them. 20,000 high school pitchers cannot all become major league closers. Only a sliver of art school graduates pay rent with gallery sales. Yet motivational posters never show the queue of equally gifted runners who finished inches behind the world record sprinter. Instead of teaching portfolio identities, multiple streams of meaning, we dangle a single golden ticket. When that ticket fails to materialize, graduates blame themselves for wasting potential, unaware the lottery odds were rigged from the start. Consider Daniel, a robotics engineer who loved classical guitar. He practiced at midnight, fingers tracing Bach after debugging servo motors all day. Friends urged him to monetize, start a YouTube channel, release covers on Spotify. He tried, chasing algorithm schedules until the instrument in his lap felt like a spreadsheet. What had been sanctuary became scoreboard. One evening, he snapped his metronome shut, whispered enough, and decided that mastery without monetization could still be meaningful, that some skills exist to nourish, not to broadcast. Watts would applaud. When you dance, you don't aim to arrive at a particular spot on the floor. The point of dancing is the dance. This reframing matters because many young professionals conflate potential solely with marketable output. If a hobby cannot scale, they reason, it siphons bandwidth from real goals. But look closer. The Silicon Valley product manager who plays jazz after work often handles ambiguity better than colleagues. Her improvisational ear hears emerging patterns in data before others detect them. The pediatric nurse who paints abstracts on weekends brings color theory into patient rooms, redesigning bland walls into calming palettes. These integrations rarely appear on performance reviews, yet they fertilize innovation. To suppress cross-pollination in pursuit of singular mastery is to prune a tree until fruit stops forming. Still, the fear persists. If I slow down, won't I fall behind? Watts calls that worry a category mistake, comparing journeys that aren't parallel. You're under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago, he reminds. The race loses power once you realize each runner heads to a different town. But relinquishing the race does not mean drifting aimlessly. Jessica, after exiting corporate finance, built side rails to steady her new road, 6-month learning arcs, weekly mentor calls, quarterly retros where she asked, "Does this still feel alive? If yes, continue. If not, pivot again." Structure became feedback, not leash. Likewise, she kept a curiosity ledger, noting subjects that sparked energy independent of applause. Obscure CSS tricks, fermented chili, East Coast lichens. Patterns emerged, steering her toward environmental data visualization, an intersection no advisor could have predicted. Quarter-life renovators also rewrite microeconomics. Many trade salary for sovereignty, compress expenses, relocate to cities where walkability replaces car loans, share houses to buy time. Critics lambast this as irresponsibility. Watts counters that clinging to high overhead cages experimentation. Lower the burn rate, and you buy the scarcest resource in modern capitalism, unpressured hours. In those hours, the nervous system shifts from sympathetic hyperdrive to parasympathetic openness, the biological soil where novel associations sprout. Which leads to the next mystery. Could letting the mind wander on purpose, without screens, without metrics, actually accelerate discovery? That question opens the door to the brain science of incubation, an arena where default mode networks hum when we shower, stroll, or stare from bus windows. Research from the University of California shows idea generation spikes when participants engage in mind-wandering tasks versus focused problem-solving. In other words, breakthroughs often surface not while we hammer at keyboards, but while we rinse coffee mugs. The implication rattles productivity culture. Every minute scheduled to optimize output might be smothering the mental drift required to see connections others miss. If so, what else, besides potential, are we strangling with our well-intentioned hustle? Researchers at the University of California recently placed engineers in an fMRI scanner and watched what happened when they were forced to stop solving a puzzle and wash dishes in their minds. Within seconds, the default mode network, the brain's backstage, lit up like a festival. When the scientists pulled the participants out and represented the puzzle, solutions clicked almost immediately. Incubation isn't procrastination, it is cognition's deep-sea diving tank. Alan Watts anticipated the finding years before the machines confirmed it. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Your unexpressed potential may be less a matter of insufficient drive than of oxygen deprivation. The mind, like yeast, needs quiet warmth to rise. But how do you engineer conditions for that warmth in a culture that schedules every quarter hour? One answer is to build deliberate off-seasons, temporary pockets where output metrics are suspended and curiosity roams without justification. Professional athletes taper, fields lie fallow. Why should minds be harvested year-round? Some companies now pilot depth weeks, shutting down non-critical email traffic so employees can chase hypotheses, not deadlines. Independent creators try digital winters, deleting social apps for 30 days and tracking which dormant instincts reawaken. These rituals are not vacations. They are agricultural. They replenish the soil from which later harvests will grow. You can prototype an off-season personally. Block the last week of every quarter as open water. No new commitments, no major launches. Label a notebook unbillable ideas and fill it with notions that earn zero revenue until one unexpectedly does. Treat evenings like artists' residencies, an hour of purposeless tinkering with a language, instrument, or recipe. Record tension in your shoulders at the start of the week and again on Sunday. The delta will tell you whether the ritual is working better than any app tracker could. If enough people protect off-seasons, the ripple reaches the institutions upstream from our anxiety, especially education. Imagine schools that grade students on risk-taking and reflective journals, not only right answers, universities that embed uncertainty semesters where undergrads must apprentice outside their major, coding boot camps that demand a final project in an unrelated art form to graduate logical thought with aesthetic range. Watts wrote, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." An education system built on that premise would measure whether learners feel awake, not merely employed. Such redesign isn't utopian. Fragments already exist. A Boston pilot program lets high school juniors trade exam prep for 3 months of unsupervised research in any field they choose: mushroom farming, improv theater, urban cartography. Colleges review the resulting portfolios. 84% of participants report clearer direction than peers who stayed in standard tracks. Meanwhile, a mid-sized tech firm in Austin schedules paid sabbaticals every 5th year. Post-leave retention is 40% higher than the industry average. The data whisper what Watts declared: when life is treated as music, people stay for the encore. So pause and take inventory. Which parts of your calendar are scaffolding and which are straitjackets? Which dashboard numbers actually inform craft and which only anesthetize fear? If the answers sting, good. Discomfort is the nervous system signaling that a renovation wants to begin. Close the laptop tonight without checking tomorrow's race. Step outside and listen for the faint pulse beneath traffic, the raw rhythm that was beating long before you had an audience to impress. Potential isn't hiding in the distance, it's humming underfoot, waiting for a lull in the noise to surface. The music is already playing. All that's left is to unclench, breathe, and let the next phrase rise.